I don't think I'll ever forget the sound my cousin made when the glass hit the floor. You know the kind, half gasp, half growl, like someone just witnessed a war crime instead of a 5-year-old knocking over a drink. Her voice sliced through the low hum of dinner conversation like a shard of that shattered wine glass. Ugh, seriously? Is he always this clumsy? She snapped, glaring at my son as if he'd just upended the entire table. He shrank back in his chair, his bottom lip trembling, a tiny patch of cranberry juice already spreading across the white tablecloth. And in that moment, just a heartbeat after the clink of glass, and before anyone else could react, I felt it again. That old, familiar tightness in my chest. The one I used to get as a kid, back when my family acted like I was the one always ruining everything, too. My name's Samuel. I'm 36, a single dad, and the only reason I even came to this dinner was because my Aunt Helen practically begged me. It's just a little family thing, she said. You and Eli should come. Everyone would love to see you again. I should have known better. There's never been a little family thing in this clan that didn't somehow spiral into a circus of guilt-tripping, subtle digs, and thinly veiled comparisons. But Eli was excited, and I told myself maybe, just maybe, things had changed. Spoiler, they hadn't. The gathering was held at Aunt Helen's house, a sprawling 2-story home with furniture that looks like it's never been sat on and carpet that's somehow always pristine. She hosts these dinners once every few months, usually under the pretense of bringing the family together. But if you've ever had that one relative who uses every get-together as a thin excuse to peacock about their kids' achievements or drop snide comments about yours, you'll understand what I was walking into. We arrived just before 6. Eli, who just turned 5 in October, clutched his stuffed tiger in one hand and my fingers in the other. I dressed him in a little collared shirt and black jeans, and he looked like a walking Hallmark card. I was proud of him. Nervous, too, because he's been a little jittery in crowds lately, but I figured a room full of family might help. The second we stepped in, I felt the shift. You know what I mean. The way heads swivel, smiles falter for half a second too long, and eyes drift down like they're scanning for flaws. Aunt Helen greeted us with her trademark air kiss and the tight-lipped smile that never quite touches her eyes. Samuel. And Eli, my goodness, look how big you've gotten. Her voice had this edge to it, like even Eli's growth was mildly inconvenient. I let it go. I always do at first. The rest of the family trickled in over the next half hour. My cousin Madison arrived late, as usual, flouncing in with her husband Brad and their 2 daughters, identical twins, dressed in matching cashmere sweaters and boots that probably cost more than my entire monthly grocery budget. Madison and I are the same age, but you wouldn't think it. Where I come off scruffy and low maintenance, she's curated like an Instagram ad. Perfect nails, perfect hair, perfect disdain in her voice when she says, "Still working freelance, Sammy?" She calls me Sammy, like she's patting a child on the head. And the worst part? My family lets her. Dinner was set up buffet style in the dining room, but we all carried our plates to the massive table that stretched through the formal living area. Eli sat beside me, quietly picking at his mashed potatoes. I was helping him cut his chicken when it happened. He reached for his cup, a tall, top-heavy thing filled way too high with cranberry juice, and it wobbled. I reached out instinctively, but I was too slow. It toppled, the juice cascading over the tablecloth like a tiny, fruity tidal wave. The glass hit the floor with a sharp crack. Silence. Then came Madison's voice, dripping with disgust. Is he always this clumsy? I looked up to see her leaning away dramatically, like the juice might leap onto her cashmere. Her daughters giggled. Aunt Helen sighed heavily, her fork clinking against her plate. Well, accidents don't happen that often. And that was it. That one sentence. That sigh? That unspoken, loaded silence where everyone just sat there, waiting to see what I would do, as if I needed to discipline my 5-year-old for a completely innocent mistake. As if he was some kind of disruption. Like he didn't belong there. Eli's lip quivered. He looked up at me with wide eyes, unsure if he'd done something wrong. That moment, it carved itself into me. Because it wasn't just about the juice. It was about years of being treated like the extra, the afterthought. It was the way my family always made excuses for Madison's tantrums growing up, but acted like I was the problem child. The way Aunt Helen paid for Madison's wedding but forgot to send a card when I graduated college. The way everyone always managed to justify their double standards with polished smiles and polite shrugs. I felt something in me snap. Not in a ragey, flip the table kind of way. No, it was colder than that. Calmer. Like the final click of a puzzle piece falling into place. I looked around the table and realized something important. They didn't expect me to say anything. They expected me to do what I always did. Smile awkwardly, apologize on behalf of my kid, and act like it was all fine. But I didn't. Not this time. I picked up the shattered glass, handed Eli a napkin, and whispered, "You're okay, buddy. It was just a mistake. Everyone makes them." Then I looked up, met Aunt Helen's eyes, and gave her a smile that probably looked warm on the surface, but had no heat underneath. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said calmly. "I forgot. Only some people are allowed to make mistakes in this family." The silence that followed was sharp and immediate. Madison blinked like I'd just spoken Greek. My Uncle George coughed into his hand. No one knew what to say, but that was fine, because I wasn't done. Aunt Helen didn't say a word after my comment. She just went back to eating, her fork moving methodically through a plate of untouched salad. But the tension at the table shifted, like the room had inhaled and didn't know when to exhale. Eli leaned closer to me, still rattled, his little hands twisting the corner of his shirt. I squeezed his shoulder and gave him a smile, trying to signal he was safe. He was. With me, he always would be. But that table, that house, that family, not safe. Not anymore. I wish I could say that moment was the worst of it, that maybe after my little jab the rest of the evening cooled off. But it didn't. In fact, it was just the beginning. Like they'd taken my quiet defiance as a personal challenge. A line had been drawn, and every word after that felt like someone daring me to cross it, or daring me to walk away. 10 minutes after the spill, Madison's husband Brad looked directly at me and chuckled. "You know, Sam, I read this article that said kids act out when they don't get enough structure at home." I didn't even look at him. I just nodded slowly, replying, "Interesting. I read one that said adults project their insecurities onto other people's kids when they're afraid of confronting their own shortcomings." He blinked. Madison gasped, more offended on his behalf than he was. Aunt Helen cleared her throat. Again, no one said a thing to stop the digs from their side. It was always like that. The pokes were fine, as long as they were coming from them. After dessert, I tried to take Eli upstairs for a breather. He was overwhelmed and overstimulated, and I could see his energy waning. He gets like that when he's around too many loud voices for too long. But Aunt Helen caught me by the stairs. "Samuel," she said sharply, "the kids play in the basement, not the guest rooms." I blinked. "He's not playing. I'm just giving him a quiet space to calm down." She gave me a tight smile. "Well, we all have to learn to function in a group eventually. Maybe if you didn't coddle him so much, he'd learn how to handle himself like the twins." The twins. Madison's prized daughters. The same girls who once locked Eli in a closet at a barbecue and told him it was a magic trick. The same girls who lied about it and cried when confronted, and somehow, I was the one who got a call from Aunt Helen about teaching Eli not to wander. I didn't argue with her then, just said, "Of course," and turned around. But something burned in me all evening. A low simmer I couldn't shake. That feeling of being watched and judged, not for what I did, but for who I was. Or more specifically, who I wasn't. See, in this family, the hierarchy was unspoken but ironclad. Aunt Helen was the matriarch. Madison was the crown jewel. Her younger brother Jeremy was the golden boy who'd fallen on hard times, but was still treated like a war hero every time he showed up for dinner. Everyone else. Background noise. Extras in the Madison show. And I was the cautionary tale. The artsy one, the dreamer, the one who didn't go to grad school, didn't marry well, didn't settle down. Even though I've supported myself and Eli without a cent from anyone, it's like they still see me as this failure that needs fixing. Dinner finally ended around 9. People started leaving, and I thought I'd escaped relatively intact, until I overheard something that stopped me in my tracks. Madison and Aunt Helen were in the kitchen, their voices low, but the acoustics in that house carry. I was in the hallway, helping Eli get his shoes on when I heard Madison say, "Honestly, I don't know why he keeps bringing that kid around. It's exhausting. I know it's sad, but not everyone wants to spend their evening babysitting a ticking time bomb." Aunt Helen sighed. "He needs to understand the world doesn't revolve around his child. I mean, poor Eli. But maybe if Samuel got his life together, he wouldn't be so sensitive." Then came the kicker. Madison whispered, I think he brings Eli just to guilt everyone into pretending he belongs here. I froze. Eli looked up at me with his big, tired eyes. Can we go home, Dad? Yeah, I said, barely managing to get the word out. Yeah, bud. Let's get out of here. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't thank them for the meal. I scooped up Eli, grabbed his backpack, and we walked out the door into the freezing night air. The wind hit my face, but I barely felt it. My heart was pounding, my jaw tight. I buckled Eli into the back seat and stood outside the car for a moment, letting the cold bite into me. They didn't just insult me. They insulted my son. My kid, who's kind and thoughtful and already more emotionally mature than half the adults in that house. My son, who spilled a drink and was made to feel like a criminal. My kid, who didn't ask to be born into this twisted web of favoritism and passive aggression. I started the car and drove home in silence. Eli fell asleep halfway there, his little head resting against his tiger, his mouth slightly open. I glanced at him at a red light and felt something shift inside me. They don't get to treat him like that. Not ever again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it all. The spill, the comments, the tone in Madison's voice when she said, "ticking time bomb." The way Aunt Helen just nodded along like she hadn't invited us in the first place. Like we were a nuisance to be managed, not family. I opened my laptop and started writing. Not a letter. Not a confrontation. Something better. See, here's the thing about being the quiet one in the family. People assume you're not paying attention, that you don't remember, that you don't notice the patterns, the side eyes, the double standards. But I do. I remember it all. I remember how Aunt Helen gave Madison $15,000 for her first house, money that was supposed to be a family fund started by Grandma's will. I remember when Jeremy totaled his car and Uncle Rich quietly paid to keep it off his record. I remember when I asked for help after Eli's mom passed, just emotional support, not even money, and Helen said, "Well, we all have our burdens, Samuel." I remember, and now I had receipts. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet, but something was forming. A slow, deliberate realization that the family had built their castle on lies and favoritism, and I had more bricks in my hand than they thought. The next day, Eli was fine. He doesn't hold on to things like I do. But I saw it in his drawings, figures with big eyes and sad faces. A spilled cup next to a table with people scowling. He didn't say anything about the dinner. He didn't need to. A week later, I got the group text from Aunt Helen. "Hi all. Planning our New Year's Eve gathering. Hope to see everyone there. Let's keep it small and festive. Let me know if you're coming. Madison, can you bring your amazing spinach dip again?" Smiley face. No mention of me. No mention of Eli. I didn't respond. 2 hours later, Madison sent a separate message, this one just to me. "Hey, just checking in. Hope there are no hard feelings about dinner." It was kind of chaotic, right? No judgment, obviously. Eli's adorable, but maybe next time we can set up a kid's table or something, just so everyone can relax. That was it. That was the message that broke the dam. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed another, deleted that one too. Instead, I opened a new document. I started writing a list. Every incident, every slight, every unspoken rule they enforced only on me, every dollar they handed to Madison, every time they made me feel like I had to apologize for existing. I wasn't going to send a nasty text. I wasn't going to yell or burn bridges. No, I was going to burn something else entirely. Because when the truth finally came out, when I laid it all bare and made them look at what they'd done, they wouldn't be able to hide behind polite smiles and thinly veiled digs anymore. They'd be exposed. Publicly, maybe. Or maybe just among each other. But either way, they would feel it. And what started with a spilled glass of cranberry juice was going to end with the whole table flipping. It's a strange kind of grief, the kind that doesn't come from a death, but from realizing something you held on to for years was never really yours. That family, that sense of belonging, it was something I'd fought for silently since I was a teenager. I told myself if I just tried hard enough, kept showing up, stayed patient, swallowed the jabs, they'd eventually see me. They'd eventually treat me like I mattered. But that week after the dinner, something shifted. And I don't just mean the anger. I mean the clarity. The silence in my apartment wasn't oppressive anymore. It was honest. No more pretending. No more forcing smiles for people who only ever looked down at me. It hurt, but it also felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. I hit a low point that Thursday. Eli had gone to bed early, exhausted after school. I just finished cleaning the kitchen when I made the mistake of opening Facebook. Madison had posted a full album from Aunt Helen's dinner. Family nights are the best nights, the caption read. Every picture was filtered and curated. Platters of food, wine glasses raised in toasts, the twins smiling in their coordinated sweaters. I wasn't in a single photo. Neither was Eli. Then I noticed the comments. Aunt Helen throws the classiest parties. Such a beautiful family. So much love here. I'm so sad we couldn't make it. Hope Eli wasn't too much for everyone. Kids can be overwhelming, lol. That last one came from Madison's best friend, Melissa, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. But it was the comment underneath that did it. Madison had replied, "You're telling me, but we survived." I think Samuel finally realized this isn't the place for toddler tantrums and juice showers. At least I hope he did. 20 words. That's all it took to rip open everything I'd been trying to patch together for years. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember walking to the window. I just remember gripping the curtain so hard my knuckles went white and thinking, why do I keep letting them do this to me? I was exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally. Decades of being the joke. The footnote. The one who tries, but never quite fits. And that night, I let myself feel it. I sat on the couch, lights off, scrolling through every text, every comment, every memory where I'd been the punchline. I pulled out the old manila folder I kept in my closet, the one with legal papers, old emails, copies of Grandma's will, scribbled notes I'd taken after phone calls with Aunt Helen when my mother passed. I read everything. And when I was done, I didn't cry. I got to work. Because here's the thing about hitting bottom, it's solid. There's no more ground left to fall through. And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't trying to climb back into their world anymore. I was building my own. The first step? Letting go of the illusion that I owed them anything. I stopped replying to the group chat, muted it completely. When Aunt Helen sent a follow-up text about New Year's, just checking if you and Eli are coming, dear, I didn't even open it. I was done begging for space at a table that had never had a seat for me in the first place. Then I started journaling. I hadn't written for myself in years, not since Eli was born. Life had been too hectic. But now, every night after putting him to bed, I opened a blank document and let it pour out. Not just what happened, but what it meant. The patterns, the manipulation, the way I'd internalized their judgment and used it to doubt myself at every turn. Writing turned into clarity, and clarity turned into action. I went back to my freelance work with new fire. I'd been limping through projects for months, burned out, uninspired, quietly discouraged. But now, I saw it for what it was, my independence, my freedom. I updated my portfolio, cleaned up my pitch emails, and reached out to 3 old clients I'd been too embarrassed to follow up with after they moved on. Within 2 weeks, I had 5 new contracts. Real ones. Ones that paid decently and gave me space to be creative. I built out a proper home office. Nothing fancy, just a desk, a second monitor, some new lighting, and a cheap but comfortable chair I found on Facebook Marketplace. I even started waking up earlier, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. I'd sit with a cup of coffee before Eli woke up, check my planner, and just think. Plan. Breathe. Eli noticed the change too. "Daddy, you smile more now," he said one morning while eating cereal. "Do I?" I asked, surprised. He nodded. "Yeah, and you don't sigh as much when your phone rings." That one hit me. Because he was right. The moment I stopped waiting for their approval, I started reclaiming pieces of myself I didn't even know I'd lost. But I wasn't done. See, there was still the matter of the will. Grandma Helen, my father's mother, passed when I was 19. I'd been close to her. Closer than Madison or Jeremy ever were. She was the only one who ever really listened to me as a kid. She used to sneak me butterscotch candies and say, "You've got your mother's kindness and your father's sharp tongue. Use both wisely." I'd never seen her will. Aunt Helen handled everything back then and told us it was simple. That Grandma had left most of her estate to her own children and split the remainder equally among the grandkids. But I remembered something Grandma once said, years before she passed. "You'll be fine, Sam." I made sure of it. One day, when you need it most, you'll see. I never thought much of it until now. I started digging. Not out of greed, but because something in me needed to know the truth. I called the lawyer listed on her old mail envelopes. He'd retired. But after a few referrals and a lot of hold music, I found the firm that had absorbed his old practice. I gave them my name, explained I was a listed family member, and asked if I could request a copy of the will. There was a pause. Then the woman on the line said, "Hold, please." When she returned, her tone had changed. More cautious. "Mr. Lucas, we'll need to verify your identity and relationship to the deceased. If you can provide proof, we can send you a certified copy of the public portion of the will." I sent in my documents. A week later, a thick envelope arrived. And when I opened it, everything changed. The will was clear. Grandma had left her primary estate to her 3 children. But there was a separate clause, one marked with a personal note. A trust fund, set aside specifically for me. To my grandson, Samuel Lucas, it read, who never asked for much but always gave love freely. I leave the sum of $50,000 to be placed in trust until his 35th birthday or until such time he has a dependent child. May this help him find peace and freedom when he needs it most. I stared at the paper for a long time, not because of the money, but because it was proof that someone had seen me, really seen me, that even when I thought I'd been invisible all those years, she hadn't forgotten me. But I'd never received that money. No one ever told me it existed. I dug further. The trust had been managed by, of course, Aunt Helen. She'd been the executor. The fund was real. It had existed. But 2 years after Eli was born, a notation was added in a scanned document that the trust had been closed and dispersed per familial agreement. I hadn't agreed to anything. I called the lawyer again, asked questions, was told I might need to file a formal dispute to see the full records, that it could take time. I didn't care. The envelope didn't leave my desk for days. I kept rereading the line, closed and dispersed per familial agreement, like the ink might rearrange itself into something more innocent the 10th time around. It didn't. Each time I saw it, that same ice spread through my chest. Aunt Helen hadn't just forgotten to tell me about the trust. She'd stolen it. Quietly. Deliberately. And she had done it under the assumption I would never find out. Maybe because she thought I was too disorganized, too soft, too busy raising a kid alone to ever start asking questions. She was almost right. But she underestimated one thing. I wasn't that kid anymore. The one who'd swallow my tongue while they cut me out of birthday parties or left me out of group photos. I wasn't the tired, broke 20-something juggling part-time gigs and hand-me-down furniture. I had stability now, confidence, and the patience of someone who's had to earn every inch of ground under his feet. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the lie, the betrayal, the years I'd spent doubting myself while Aunt Helen played matriarch and Madison posed for holiday cards under the illusion of a perfect, close-knit family. I started documenting everything. I created a private Google Drive folder, labeled simply, Trust Dispute Evidence, and uploaded scans of the will, the correspondence from the law firm, old emails, texts, anything that even remotely hinted at how they'd managed to convince everyone, including the attorney, that the trust could be quietly closed without my consent. I added screenshots of group texts, comments from Facebook, anything that painted the dynamic as clearly as possible. I wasn't just collecting receipts. I was building a case. Not necessarily for court. Not yet. But for truth. For clarity. For power. I even went to the courthouse and pulled public financial records on the estate distribution. It cost me a day and a headache, but it was worth it. What I found confirmed everything. The money had been moved. $50,000. In 2 transfers. The records showed it went from the estate's holding account to a joint family trust overseen by Aunt Helen, and from there, reallocated to support familial needs. I dug deeper. A few months after that transfer, a record of a home improvement loan being paid off on Madison's house. A new car registration in Jeremy's name. Matching dates, matching timelines. It didn't take a forensic accountant to figure it out. They'd used my trust fund to pay for their luxuries. And suddenly, everything, every past slight, every ignored birthday, every polite but hollow check-in text, snapped into place. They didn't just look down on me. They'd been feeding off me. I thought about marching straight to a lawyer. But something stopped me. It wasn't enough to just win. I needed them to see it. To feel the weight of what they'd done. Not in a courtroom where they could brush it off with apologies and settlements, but in front of the very people they'd lied to. They loved their image, their reputation. Madison and Aunt Helen especially were obsessed with curating this picture-perfect illusion of a generous, close family. I was going to tear that picture apart, frame by frame. But I had to be patient. and I needed help. The first person I contacted was someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 4 years, my cousin Lacey. She was Aunt Helen's niece through marriage, technically not blood, and always the black sheep. She'd moved to Chicago after high school and never looked back. Rumor was she got into a screaming match with Aunt Helen over some money drama and was cut off. Back then, I didn't understand what happened. Now, I had a pretty good guess. I sent her a short message on Facebook. Hey, it's Sam. Random, but I'm dealing with something involving Aunt Helen. You're the only person I know who might understand. Can I ask you a question? She responded within an hour. Is this about the will? My heart dropped. Yes. Her reply came fast. Call me. I've been waiting for someone else to wake up. We spoke for 3 hours that night. She told me everything. How Aunt Helen convinced her not to fight for her portion of a family scholarship fund. How she was manipulated into signing something she didn't fully understand at 19. How Madison always got special treatment, even as a teenager. Lacey's voice was still raw, like the wounds hadn't healed. But when I told her what I'd uncovered, about my trust fund, about the misappropriation, she went silent. Then she whispered, "They did it to you too." She offered to send me her documents. She still had copies of the forms she'd signed. Turns out the language in them was sketchy at best, vague, open-ended, not properly notarized. And there was a name on one of the signature lines that rang a bell, Bradley Jensen, Madison's husband. The guy who smirked across the dinner table while suggesting my kid needed more structure. Apparently, Brad had helped Aunt Helen with some of the trust fund paperwork. He worked in finance, something private equity. Lacey said she remembered seeing him at the attorney's office once. She didn't know why he was there at the time. Now we both did. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was a pattern of manipulation and theft. And I wasn't the only victim. Over the next few weeks, I reached out to 2 more cousins, one who lived in Portland, another in Dallas. Both had quietly drifted from the family years ago. Both had their own stories. Not as dramatic, but familiar. Unreturned calls, missing funds, weird loans that were never repaid. And both, when I explained what I'd found, offered to back me up. We weren't just isolated cases anymore. We were a pattern. Aunt Helen had built a kingdom by convincing each of us that we were alone, unworthy, or just unlucky. But now we had each other. And we had proof. The plan was simple. Use the next family gathering to lay it all out. They always held a big brunch in early February, post-holiday, but still an event. Aunt Helen would go all out, of course. Matching napkins, floral centerpieces, mini quiches. She loved nothing more than being the center of attention in her designer apron. Perfect. I RSVP'd like nothing was wrong. Madison texted me a few days before, casual as ever. Hope you and Eli can come to brunch. We'll keep the juice to a minimum, this time winking face. I stared at that winky face for a long time. Then I replied, wouldn't miss it. Got something special planned. What I had planned wasn't explosive. It wasn't dramatic or vengeful in a Hollywood kind of way. No screaming matches. No wine thrown in faces. It was colder, sharper. I made packets. Actual printed folders. One for every adult in the family. Inside each one was a neatly organized stack. A copy of the original will, highlighted. A timeline of the trust's activity. Scanned financial records showing the dates the funds were moved. Comparison screenshots of purchases made around the same time. And at the bottom, a simple 2-page letter I wrote. It was firm, polite, almost clinical, but it ended with a question. If this was your child, how would you feel knowing the people he trusted the most took from him before he could even walk? I sealed each packet in a blank manila folder. On the day of the brunch, I dressed Eli in his favorite sweater. We brought homemade muffins. Madison greeted us at the door with her usual sparkle. You made it. I smiled. Of course. Wouldn't miss it. Aunt Helen was bustling in the kitchen, doing her best Martha Stewart impersonation. Jeremy was already on his 3rd mimosa. The twins were squealing in the living room about something on TikTok. I waited. Waited through the introductions, the chit-chat, the small talk about weather and property taxes and Madison's upcoming vacation. Then, right before everyone sat down to eat, I stood up. Hey, I said, loud enough to silence the room. Before we eat, I've got something I want to share. All eyes turned to me. Aunt Helen raised an eyebrow. Samuel, can it wait until after we've eaten? I smiled. It'll only take a second. I opened my bag, pulled out the stack of folders. One by one, I placed them on the table. Quiet. Methodical. In front of Madison. Brad. Jeremy. Aunt Helen. The uncles. The aunts. What is this? Someone asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I leaned down, kissed Eli on the top of the head, and said, "Go play, bud." Then I looked up at the room, took a deep breath, and said, "Let's talk about Grandma's will." The room froze. Aunt Helen's face drained of color. And in that moment, right there, in that pristine kitchen surrounded by people who had once treated me like I didn't belong, I saw it. Fear. Not the fear of consequences, but the fear of being exposed. The moment I said those words, "Let's talk about Grandma's will," the energy in the room shifted so fast, I swear I felt it in my bones. You could have heard a fork drop, and considering this family loves to fill silence with pointless commentary, that silence meant something. Aunt Helen stood frozen near the sink, spatula in hand, like I'd just told her the house was on fire. Madison blinked rapidly, eyes darting to her husband. Brad didn't move. He was already reading. Nobody said a word for at least 20 seconds. And then, like clockwork, the deflections began. "What is this supposed to be?" Aunt Helen asked, her voice pitched higher than usual. "Why would you bring this to a family brunch?" She hadn't even opened the folder yet. I stayed calm, kept my voice steady. "Because you told me to show up, and I did. Now it's time you all show up too." To the truth. Jeremy tried to laugh it off. "Come on, Sam, this is a bit much, right? It's ancient history." "Is it?" I asked. "Because last time I checked, the trust Grandma left me wasn't supposed to pay for your car, Jeremy. Or your house renovations, Madison. Or Brad's landscaping business." And yet, I let the sentence hang in the air as they flipped the pages. Brad's face turned a shade paler. Madison opened her mouth to speak, but all that came out was a tiny sound, half breath, half panic. Aunt Helen slowly pulled the documents from her folder, her fingers trembling slightly. I could see it then, the moment realization hit. Not just that I knew, but that I could prove it. "I don't know where you got these numbers, but you're taking things out of context," she said quickly, her tone now shifting from shock to damage control. "There were agreements. Family understandings. These were group decisions." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny. I don't remember being invited to any of those conversations. Or signing anything." I pointed at the scanned legal document she'd sent to the lawyer. "You forged a familial agreement. You closed the trust without my consent. That's theft, Aunt Helen. It doesn't matter how polite it looks in brunch clothes." I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. The evidence was louder than I could ever be. "I was trying to help everyone," she snapped suddenly, the calm mask cracking. Jeremy needed help. Madison was starting a family. I did what I thought was best for all of us. I tilted my head. "So you took from a single father who was drowning in grief and diapers because you thought my needs were what? Less important?" The guilt hit them first. You could see it on some of the quieter relatives, Uncle Ron, Cousin Ellie, people who had stayed neutral for years. Their eyes dropped. Some of them looked sick. Then came the real blow. I turned to Brad. "You might want to pay attention to page 7. That's your signature. On a legal disbursement form. You claim to be my financial proxy, without my knowledge." Brad's eyes widened. "That's not. I didn't know, Helen told me." "She told you to sign something you didn't understand?" I asked. "Interesting. And now that I've filed a formal inquiry with the probate court to investigate the trust, your name's on the line too." That got his attention. He actually stood up, muttering something about needing air, and walked out the front door without another word. Madison looked like she'd been slapped. "I had no idea that's what the money was for," she said. "Mom said it came from the general estate." "You didn't ask," I said flatly. "Because it was easier not to." Jeremy, as usual, just kept quiet. "Coward." Aunt Helen tried to rally. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. No one meant to steal from you, Samuel. We were just trying to keep things balanced." "Balanced?" I laughed. Not bitter. Not angry. Just exhausted. "For years, you made me feel like I was less. That Eli and I were an inconvenience. Meanwhile, you were spending my inheritance to give Madison a kitchen remodel. That's not balance. That's betrayal." She flinched. "I'm not here for an apology," I said, glancing around the room. "I'm here to make sure none of you can pretend anymore. I've already opened a case with the executor's office. If I wanted to, I could press charges. But I won't. Not yet." She latched onto that. So what do you want?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I want acknowledgement. I want you to admit in front of this family, that you stole from me, that you lied, that for years, you made me feel small to cover up what you did. More silence. Then a single voice, soft but clear. You should say it, Mom. Everyone turned. Madison. Her eyes were glassy, her face tight. I didn't know, she said again, to me this time. Not really. But now that I see this, he's right. Aunt Helen looked like she'd been shot. Madison. But Madison held up a hand. No. We always let you handle things, and we never questioned it. You always said Samuel was dramatic, or overreacting, or difficult. And we believed you. But he wasn't. He was just easy to ignore. She turned to me, and for once, her voice didn't have that smug undertone. It was flat, honest. I'm sorry. For all of it. A beat passed. Then Aunt Helen, still clutching her folder like it might dissolve in her hands, said the words I never thought I'd hear. I stole from you. She didn't say it loud, or proud, but she said it. I stole from you, she repeated. I thought you wouldn't notice. I thought you'd just let it go, like you always did. I exhaled. Deep. Long. The dam was broken. I didn't say thank you. Didn't offer forgiveness. Just nodded. Then I reached into my bag and handed her an envelope. Not legal documents. Just a typed note. You have 30 days to repay the $50,000 into a dedicated trust account for Eli. After that, I go public, with lawyers. She didn't argue. I left with Eli not long after. As we buckled into the car, he asked, "Did we have fun?" I paused. "Yeah," I said. "We did something important." The fallout came fast. By the end of the week, Madison posted a long-winded family transparency post on Facebook. Vague, PR slick, but clearly a damage control move. Comments were turned off. Jeremy texted me an apology that looked suspiciously copy-pasted. Brad never reached out. But from what I heard, he stepped down from his firm to focus on family. And Aunt Helen? She repaid the money. Every cent into an account in Eli's name. No interest. No apology note. Just a cashier's check delivered by certified mail. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. Because I didn't just get the money back. I got something else. I got peace. The kind that comes from finally standing up. Not with fury, but with truth. The kind that builds when you stop waiting for people to change, and instead, change the rules they've been playing by. Eli and I moved apartments a few months later. Nothing huge. Just something brighter. A space with more light, more laughter, less history. I didn't cut everyone off. But I stopped trying to earn their approval. I stopped making room in my life for people who only wanted me around if I played small. The next family event came and went. I wasn't invited. I was okay with that. Because for once, I wasn't holding the empty glass. I was holding the pen, and I was writing my own ending.